Firelight Radio, don't touch the dial, 'cause here we go. You're just in time for the show at Firelight Radio. Welcome to Firelight Radio, where we tune in to the nature folk movement, and boy do we have a program for you today. And let me start off by just saying, it's really good to have you by the campfire. And how rude of me, I didn't even introduce myself. My name is Guitar. I know what you're thinking. Are you a real live talking guitar? Yes, I am, and I'm talking to you now. And the reason I'm a guitar is because, well, I don't think you can have a nature folk movement without a guitar around a campfire. And who not better to be a spokesman for a guitar around a campfire than, well, yours truly, a guitar. You know, we could have paid a celebrity to come in, you know, an old sports star, or who knows, anyone. But we just thought for budget-friendly reasons, it might just be good to let the folk guitar do the talking. There was some discussion about bringing in an electric guitar, but that whole thing of, you know, using electricity, well, that became a budget issue too. Not to mention, it might not be perfectly in sync with what the nature folk movement is all about. And now, nature folk is all about rekindling that old spirit or values of how we used to do things before we were all walking around with smartphones and preoccupied with, well, what they call the boogie phone. Now, you've heard of the boogeyman. Well, the boogie phone is maybe a little scarier, but you're carrying it around with you all the time. And maybe more appropriately, the boogie phone is kind of a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. The phones help us really navigate through the world, but they also hinder us and distract us from some of those old values and old activities and old way of thinking how we used to do things. And that's why we're here today at Firelight Radio, is we're trying to promote some programming that reconnects us with that nature folk spirit that's really never went away. It's right there. We just kind of have to learn to grab onto it, because we think that it can be an enriching part of our lives individually, but as a community too. I mean, when you think about the water cycle, and the water cycle really brings us together as a community. The more you know about the water cycle, the more you know about everything that's going in the natural world around you. And we could say the same thing about getting in touch with history, about getting in touch with some of those senses that the internet has kind of ignored. Like, for example, the sense of smell. The boogie phone cannot smell, and he takes great umbrage. That's his only weakness, actually. And if you want to defeat the boogie phone, something to do with the smell. We're still trying to figure that out. So it's good to have you here around the campfire. And with that being said, let's get to our programming. And without further ado, let's go to the show. Singer-songwriter Bobby Angel strums, no finger picking, and there are no drums, but he always has an interview when the song is done. Bobby Angel. Billy Joyner was a man of honor, a husband, a son, a good friend, and a father who woke up every morning and he went out on the trail and returned in the evening, guaranteed without fail, always with a story or two or three or 10 to tell. No matter how deep the drought, there was always water in that well. In a voice, when he said it, it sounded like a yell. Billy Joyner was a man of honor, a brother with sisters, and a loving father, with a sparkle in his eye and a smile on his face, who walked at an ever quickening pace. He was a man on a mission to find that next place, and always getting there sooner than later, post haste. Unless of course there was a story, then yeah, he had a minute or 10 to waste. He'd tell you about the snail kites swimming up in the breeze, and the water in the strand, how it was already up to the knees, and how he was a voice that spoke up for the trees, or would gladly give a bear his kerchief if it ever had to sneeze. He had his finger on the pulse of what it meant to be free. Billy Joyner was a man of honor, a friendly face in the crowd you could count on like a brother, who liked to tell you all the things he knew and saw, and no, not just pieces of it. He told it to you all, and he'd repeat it the next days until it grew so tall. He was never at a loss of words that I can never recall. Billy Joyner is the man of the hour. We plant this tamarind tree in the name of your honor, in hopes it will leaf out and be replenished by afternoon showers, and give shade when it blooms by its many flowers, to match the stories you told us hour after hour. Billy Joyner, you were a friend to all, and like this tree in our memories, you will always stand tall. I remember my first job. I worked at Crow's Nursery. It was sold plants in the middle of Bel Air, and it was kind of an institution when I was growing up, but it's not there anymore. Anyhow, I worked there for a year, and I remember I went up to the proprietor and I said, I'd like a job, and he said, sure, here's an application, and he asked me, what would you like in terms of pay? And I said, it was my first job. I said, I don't know, minimum wage. So that's what he gave me, $3.25 minimum wage. And I did it, and I really liked it, and I learned kind of the camaraderie of the workplace there, and in some ways I did, and just the mystique of working at a place that you used to visit and buy stuff at. I thought that was kind of interesting. Anyhow, I was, some of the crews would go out and do landscaping jobs. I never did that. I was kind of always just helping out with things, anyhow. The next year, I worked, I got to make more money. I got a job with construction. My brother had kind of set the stage, paved the way at Wayne Carter Construction, and that paid a whopping $5 per hour, and that was a big pay hike. So, and it was at working construction that there was just that point in time, that crew I was on, there was so much camaraderie and stories that I remember to this day like I would a high school stories. Dom was the foreman and kind of the lead mason, and then there were other guys on the crew, the trifecta of masons, as my brother called them. Don't know if that was true. And just the whole, and then we'd every break we'd rush to get done with the morning's work, and there'd be like a morning break, and we'd all gather together and we'd play cards. Or usually at lunch we'd play cards. It depended on kind of the tenor of the day. And at the card table, we play this game pitch, and there was just a ton of, and at that, so it was kind of a coming age story for me in a way. I kind of was a reclusive teenager in high school, and my brother kind of given me the name on the job site one day. He called me, "Hey, Buzz." And one of the other guys, Sticks, heard that. He said, "What did you call him?" My brother said, "Buzz." And everybody started calling me Buzz. I was just the guy that didn't talk that much. And so, I don't know, it was kind of not a rebirth, but, when you show up to a new crowd, you kind of get reborn in a way. And just the camaraderie there is something that I'll just never forget. And the vivid memories. And the guy Sticks, he was such a talented mason, but he struggled in other aspects of his life. Not that he knew it. So he would make just enough money to kind of be gone for a couple weeks, and then he'd show back up to work. And he was such a talented mason, and it was like he did that. That was just what he did. And I remember one day being up on a chimney, and they were doing the chimney, he and Binsky. And Binsky couldn't talk and lay brick at the same time. He could do one or the other, but on that day, he was just talking to me. So Sticks, who must have been just, not 3 sheets to the wind, but, just his, and he was just, he was infatigable in some ways, and just a happy-go-lucky guy. He was laying 9 of the bricks to Binsky's 1 as he talked to me. And then Sticks was so affable, he would even take Binsky's brick and relay it, because Binsky didn't quite lay it right, because he couldn't talk and lay brick at the same time. Anyhow, what is my point here is, one day, a friend of mine, his older brother, said to me, and he worked on one of the landscape crews that cut the lawns where I grew up. It was kind of high school kids joined into these lawn cutting crews. And Robbie said to me, "Don't you feel guilty? All that destruction you're doing to the environment, working construction?" And And yes, we all lamented that, how our backyards that were farm fields gave way to subdivision after subdivision. Before you knew it, it was just a suburban maze. And I remember, he was older than me and I really respected him, but I remember at the time I said, "Yeah, but you wouldn't have a job either if they weren't building these houses for all these lawns to mow." And he said, "Yeah, I think he acknowledged I was kind of right." So, what my point here is, Billy Joyner, kind of his backstory to coming to the preserve, and he worked at the preserve for over a decade, was he worked in construction, and he was kind of, I can imagine him in the construction world, just loving the camaraderie of the job site and being around the guys, and really, being a vital, kind of vibrant member of the team. He just had a can-do spirit. And then, I think just to be closer to home, he got a job in his backyard. There was a job for a heavy equipment operator in Big Cypress National Preserve, and he saw the opportunity, and he lived local in Everglades City, and he grabbed it. And another one of his colleagues, Pete, was telling me how he really saw the job and the mission in the park, that it was protecting the trees. And Billy, it was coming from the construction field. It was an evolution in thought for him, and he really embraced it. And by the end, he really spoke up for the trees. He saw what was going on, and he would tell me about what he saw. He would tell Tony and others about, the things he was seeing. And he just, and I think he came from that construction pedigree, just being a part of the team and, gathering around at lunch and eating together. He knew that communication was vital. And I also think it goes back to, that there was a guy when I worked in the Wayne Carter Construction, the guy that ran the company. He always would hire on some not questionable people, but people that they needed him a job, and he gave him a job in wide latitude. And remember, my brother said, yeah, that's his ticket to heaven, giving him that job. And not that that was the case for Billy, but I think him kind of, he found his place in heaven in the preserve. He loved being in the backcountry. He loved protecting his backyard from the development that he was kind of involved in from, the early part of his career. And, goes back what Robbie said to me, and I think, yeah, we all, so I think it was, for Billy Joyner working in the swamp, he loved it every day of it. And he loved the people that he worked with. And he was always a man on the mission. And I think it was his, ticket to heaven. And it was paradise for him. So, yeah, in memory of Billy Joyner, I only knew him in passing, but every time we passed, he would stop me, and he had a story to tell, and he did always have a sparkle in his eye, and there was always a skip in his step. He always walked wherever he was going really fast and loud. Yes, his voice was a whisper. His whisper sounded like a yell, but it was a fun, loving yell. Anyhow, rest in peace, Billy Joyner. This song's for you. Singer-songwriter Bobby Angel strums, no finger picking and there are no drums, but he always has an interview when the song is done. Bobby Angel. Well, there was a quality message, folks, and the more I just sit back and listen to whatever somebody else has to say around the campfire, it just makes me really pause for thought. You go into kind of a deep listening mode around the campfire, and I know you're thinking, how good at listening is a guitar? And actually a guitar helps amplify sound. Think about it that way. When you're plucking the strings of good old, and some people do call me that. My nickname is Strings, but many people call me by guitar. The guitar really amplifies sound, and that's what we're here around the campfires, trying to amplify the message of the nature folk movement. And that's what the campfire is all about, and that's what Firelight Radio is all about. So thank you so much for tuning in, and I'm just going to sit here and strum at my strings a little bit and listen to the crackle, and we'll see you next time.